The queen who demanded blood for her bed did. There was once a queen whose nighttime chamber was not won by poetry promise or sweet words, but by the blade of a rival. A queen who forced contenders to duel for the privilege to lie beside her. A queen whose power twisted love and violence into a strange nightly ritual. Let us step back into the 17th century lands of southern Africa to meet Nzinga of Ndongo and Matamba. In the mid-1600s in what is now Angola, a woman of astonishing ambition grew into power. She would be known as Nzinga. She was born around 1583 into the royal line of the Ndongo people. From childhood, she learned politics, war, and survival. She watched betrayals among nobles, lived through shifting alliances with the Portuguese colonizers, and navigated a world where a misstep could be death. Nzinga rose to power in a time when European powers pressed deeper into Africa's interior. The Portuguese desired control of trade, land, and souls. The kingdoms of Ndongo and Matamba were under pressure. Nzinga would not bow. She chose to resist. She played diplomacy and war in equal measure. She spoke with governors, wore armor, rode into battle. She demanded respect. She declared that she wished not to be called a queen but a king. She dressed in what were then considered male regalia and claimed her authority in masculine terms. She reversed many of the norms that bound women in her region. She gathered men around her in a way that startled observers. She formed what are sometimes called male wives, young men who belonged to her court and served in capacities often reserved for women. Over time, rumors circulated of a ritual so fierce that men vied for it with fear and resolve. The claim is that at times Nzinga would summon two of her male wives or noble suitors and challenge them to combat. They would duel, sometimes to the death, and the victor would spend a night in her bedchamber. After that night, he might be executed or dismissed. The cycle would repeat. That fierce custom made her name infamous. We must pause here to note. Historians debate how much of that tale is literal, how much is symbolic, how much is exaggerated by storytellers. Much of the evidence is fragmentary. But what we do know is that Nzinga used extreme displays of power to maintain dominance in a landscape of danger. She reversed gender norms. She controlled life and death within her court. She extrapolated her authority into the personal realm of intimacy. Let us float over to another royal disaster. Nzinga's realm never enjoyed long peace. Wars with the Portuguese raged. Alliances shifted among African polities. Nzinga allied with the Dutch at times to counter Portuguese power. She moved her base from Ndongo into Matamba. She resisted having her kingdom swallowed by colonial ambitions. Her life was war diplomacy, a dance on a razor. In one campaign, she led troops herself. She ordered ambushes, she negotiated terms, and when betrayal threatened, she struck mercilessly. But in those darker corners, she also cultivated symbolism. She staged court rituals. She manipulated image. She presented herself as unyielding. She created a mythos that few would dare challenge. Back in the palace, the legend of her nightly duels lingered. Men in her court walked with fear and hope. Each night, the possibility glimmered that a duel might be called. Each man carried his own ambition and dread. The rumors said she never slept twice with the same man. She kept her suitors in constant tension. The victor's reward was brief, the cost perhaps fatal. But Nzinga's power was not limited to spectacle. She secured treaties, held court with envoys from European powers and her African neighbors. She survived for decades in a turbulent era. She left no easy legacy. Her death came in 1663 at her base in the highlands of Matamba. Her body was carried by mourners for 12 days to be buried. Her political structures endured struggles after her. Over the centuries, storytellers adapted her tale. Some claimed she forced men to kill one another just to reach her bed. Some claimed she commanded their lives in such detail that no man dared resist. But whether the duels to win her favor were literal or poetic, they echo a deeper truth. Nzinga wielded sex, power, violence, and subversion as tools in a world that sought to define her. In the next part, we will explore how her nightly ritual narrative evolved in memory, how historians approach claims of the duels, and how her myth shaped later perceptions of female power. We will follow threads from court to memory to legend and see how much can be rescued from the blur of centuries. Did you know that Queen Nzinga's legend was so powerful that it crossed oceans and centuries? Even European chroniclers who feared her wrote about her with a strange mix of awe and unease. Her story blurred the line between fact and myth until it became something greater than either, a symbol of defiance in a colonized world. Let's drift to the aftermath of her rise. The Portuguese envoys who visited her court expected a docile ruler, perhaps a woman they could command. Instead, they found a monarch who made them bow. There is an old record that says when a Portuguese governor refused to offer her a chair at negotiations, she ordered one of her attendants to kneel, then sat on that attendant's back, so she would face him as an equal. The scene stunned the visitors. In that moment, a new legend was born. It was these same chroniclers who carried her image back to Europe. They painted her as both barbaric and brilliant. They described her court rituals in vivid terms: young men adorned in feathers, blades gleaming, songs echoing through torchlight halls. They claimed her bedchamber was both throne and battlefield. Whether those reports were truth or theater, they shaped how her name would echo for centuries. Nzinga's dueling custom was not entirely unique in its time. Across regions of Africa and Europe, rituals of combat for honor or affection existed. But what made hers unforgettable was its reversal of roles. Here was a queen demanding that men prove worth through violence, not for conquest or political favor, but for intimacy. The act turned patriarchal power on its head. Let's float for a moment to the deeper layer of meaning. In many oral histories of Central Africa, queens were guardians of spiritual and earthly balance. Power was not merely administrative, it was sacred. Nzinga's use of ritual violence might have carried symbolic weight, a demonstration that she alone commanded both the spear and the bed, the body and the kingdom. In her court, loyalty and desire were the same test. She kept her rivals close, sometimes turning former enemies into subjects. The duels, real or symbolic, enforced a rule of fear that bred loyalty. Each man in her orbit lived under the shadow of her favor. Her strength lay not just in armies but in psychology. She ruled hearts through terror, admiration, and fascination. But let's move to how her legend grew after her death. The Portuguese never forgot her. Missionaries and colonists told tales of her savagery to warn others about rebellion. Yet, in African oral traditions, she became a hero, a figure who resisted foreign domination longer than almost anyone of her time. To some, she was the embodiment of cunning leadership. To others, a sacred mother of freedom. In the 19th century, explorers arriving in Angola still heard songs about the queen who ruled men through the sword and the kiss. In one version of the song, a line says, asterisk, her lovers were soldiers and her love was war. Asterisk, the imagery endured. In every retelling, the duels became grander. In some, she slew her lovers herself at dawn. In others, she spared them but sent them to impossible missions. The truth hides somewhere between those extremes. Some historians now think the tales of dueling lovers may have emerged from Portuguese attempts to portray her as monstrous, to justify their own wars against her. After all, colonial powers often twisted stories of strong women into moral warnings. Nzinga's defiance was turned into scandal, her brilliance into savagery. Yet the myth carried a different meaning to her people. It was not about cruelty. It was about control, about a woman who refused to be owned. The idea that men had to fight to reach her bed was less about lust and sovereignty. It told the world, the queen's body was her kingdom, and no one entered it without battle. Let's glide further into her political genius. Nzinga used marriage and ritual unions as tools of diplomacy. She allied with neighboring chiefs through promises of kinship. She converted to Christianity when it suited her strategy, adopting the name Ana de Souza after her baptism, then turned away from it when the cross no longer benefited her cause. She wore religion as she wore armor, a means of survival. Under her rule, Matamba became a thriving hub of trade. Caravans moved through the forests carrying salt, copper, and cloth. Envoys from across Central Africa came to her court seeking alliance. Even late in life, when she was over 60, Nzinga still commanded respect. Visitors recorded that she held council every morning, dressed in bright cloth and gold ornaments. Still as proud as when she rode to war, she was a paradox. A ruler who could bless a priest one day and lead a battle the next. A queen who adopted foreign faith but never let go of her ancestral spirits. A leader who embodied both the sword and the shrine. As time passed, her story traveled beyond Africa. European historians wrote of her as a cruel Amazon queen. Modern writers saw her as the earliest symbol of African resistance to colonialism. Her life inspired novels, theater plays, and even political movements. Angolan independence fighters in the 20th century carried her image as an emblem of courage. Let's float now to one more layer, her myth in modern culture. Today, scholars revisit the story of her dueling lovers, not to dismiss it, but to understand what it says about power and gender. Whether or not she truly made men fight for her bed, the myth reveals how people tried to explain her dominance. In societies where power and masculinity were intertwined, the only way to imagine such a woman was to make her terrifyingly sensual. Thus, the duels became a metaphor for her defiance, her command, her refusal to yield to any man. In every version of her story, one truth remains constant. Nzinga chose to rule by her own laws. Did you know that Queen Nzinga's power lasted long after her battles ended? Even in her final years, she ruled not from fear but from wisdom and reputation. She had survived decades of shifting alliances, wars, betrayals, and myths. By the time she reached old age, she was not just a ruler, she was the embodiment of endurance itself. Let's drift back to her later court in the mid-1600s. The once relentless warrior queen now wore silk and beads instead of armor. She sat beneath carved wooden ceilings while envoys from distant lands waited for her word. Her presence still carried the gravity of command. Those who entered her chamber bowed, not just to a monarch, but to a living legend. In these later years, Nzinga began to shift her strategy. The endless wars with the Portuguese had drained her kingdom. Trade routes had faltered. Villages were weary of bloodshed. The queen, once known for the duels that symbolized dominance, turned her sharp mind toward diplomacy once again. She opened dialogue with the colonial power she had spent a lifetime resisting. But this was not surrender, it was evolution. Nzinga understood the tides of history. She realized that lasting survival required more than the spear. She began to focus on rebuilding her economy, strengthening agriculture, and protecting her people from the growing slave trade that devastated Central Africa. Let's float to a moment of quiet transformation. In her 60s, Nzinga once again embraced Christianity, not as a foreign symbol but as a political tool. She invited missionaries to her court, ordered the construction of churches, and presented herself as a Christian queen. Her enemies saw it as submission. But to her subjects, it was strategy, one more mask in her endless play of survival. Even in peace, her reputation as the Queen of Jewels never vanished. Traders and travelers still whispered about the rituals of her youth. They told new generations that no man could claim her without combat, that even love in her court demanded courage. These tales traveled from fireside to marketplace, from sailor to scholar. Each retelling added another layer until she became larger than life. Nzinga's true battles, though, were not of the sword but of endurance. She spent her last years teaching her successor how to rule wisely. She emphasized balance, strength with mercy, strategy with faith. She had seen kingdoms rise and fall, and she knew that legacy, not victory, was what truly endured. Let's move gently to her final chapter. In 1663, Queen Nzinga died in Matamba at around 80 years old, an extraordinary age for her era. Her death marked the end of one of the most remarkable reigns in African history. Her people mourned for 12 days, carrying her body through forests and rivers to her resting place. The sound of drums echoed for miles. Warriors lowered their weapons. Women wept openly. For years after her passing, her court continued her customs. They honored her as both a monarch and a spirit. Songs of her duels and victories filled ceremonies. The tales blended memory and myth until they were inseparable. To the Portuguese, she remained the fierce enemy who defied them. To her people, she became a protector in the afterlife, a mother of their land. Centuries passed, yet her shadow lingered. In the 20th century, during Angola's struggle for independence, revolutionaries invoked her name. They painted murals of her riding into battle, crowned with feathers, sword raised high. To them, she was not a tale of romance or cruelty. She was resistance itself. Historians today still debate the truth behind the dueling lovers. Some argue it was an invention of missionaries who wanted to portray her as immoral. Others believe there was a kernel of truth, a ritual of loyalty turned into legend by foreign tongues. But the accuracy of that story matters less than what it reveals. That Nzinga's power was so vast, it demanded myth to contain it. Let's glide now into reflection. Imagine her standing on a high plateau at dusk, looking over her kingdom. The wind moves through the grass. The drums are silent for once. In that moment, the queen who made men duel for her affection, who fought empires, who outlived enemies and allies alike, simply watches the sun descend. Perhaps even she knew that no ruler can outfight time. Yet she achieved something greater than time, memory. Her image endured across 5 centuries, surviving the distortions of colonizers and the embellishments of storytellers. She became a figure who could be many things at once: warrior, queen, strategist, lover, and symbol of sovereignty. Today, when people speak of Queen Nzinga, they remember more than her rumored duels. They remember a woman who refused to be conquered, a woman who ruled in a world designed to silence her, a woman who made power her own language. So perhaps the truth lies not in whether her lovers fought to reach her, but in the idea that every moment of her life was a duel, against empire, against betrayal, against the destiny others tried to force upon her. And in that final sense, Queen Nzinga never lost. Her legend became her immortality,